Hello guys, welcome back to the video. Today we are reacting to film theory. Can Disney steal Spider-Man? Disney versus Sony Part 2 by the film theory. So I really expect. So 3, 2, 1, let's react.
What can sir? Mouse?
I'm looking for a car, something sporty, something sexy.
Well then, do I have the perfect vehicle for you. It's a Porsche Spider. Super high-end, great track speeds. Heads will be turning when you take this baby out on the road.
Oh boy, I'll take it.
Fantastic! Though, be warned, it is an expensive car. We're talking close to $100K for this baby.
I said I'll take it.
Price is no object,
Alright.
I see. Great! I'll just ring it up right now.
You clearly don't understand. I said I'll take that Spider, and I'll take it for free. If I need to, I'll buy up every other car dealership in the area just to put you out of business. That Spider will be mine for $0. And you know what? You'll be glad about that. I'll show it off alongside all my other cars, and you will love it. You'll eat it up. You won't be able to get enough as I sell you the privilege to watch me show off all my cars.
Are we still talking about cars?
I'll make millions, billions off that free Spider.
I think Mickey Mouse is the devil. Alright. Just like face reveal. Mickey Mouse is the devil. I mean, who does that voice? It's gotta be someone, some of like their editors or his friends. It's someone that is not Mickey Mouse. That is not a Mickey Mouse voice actor that does that voice. But I don't know who it is. It's very good Mickey Mouse voice.
Okay. So would you like roadside insurance with that? Hello,
He's
Internet.
taking it.
Welcome to Film Theory. Not owned by Disney yet, but we are available. So last time we talked about Disney's other star attraction, Elsa. But the time before that, we talked about Spider-Man and whether it makes sense for Disney to outright buy the movie rights to the character, as well as all the other 900 characters that he's associated with, all away from Sony Pictures for the cool price of $5 billion. Ultimately concluding that yes, it's a deal that makes a
$5 billion.
surprising amount of sense, despite that figure being higher than what they paid for the entirety of the Marvel and Star Wars universes. The long and short of it was that they would get greater creative control over how the character gets used, while also making more profit than they're currently getting in their current deal with Sony. He becomes the leader of the new Avengers, big villains get their own standalone releases a la Venom, minor characters and villains get their own Disney Plus shows, everyone sells a whole lot of merch, and Disney finally earns enough to knock down the Hollywood sign and rebrand the entirety of LA as Disneyland. It's just now the whole
Disneyland.
southern half of the state of California. However, at the end of the episode, I alluded to one key sticking point in this whole issue: the possibility of Disney getting Spider-Man for free. Why pay 10 or even $5 billion for something when you can get the biggest discount in history and just walk away with it all for the low price of $0 billion? You don't even have to clip any coupons or use your Honey browser plugin. For as crazy as that might sound, it's actually within the realm of possibility. So join me today for an episode of Film Theory all about game.
How can they steal Spider-Man? How can they get Spider-Man for just $0? For $0, just they steal it. It's not really stealing, because if they stole it, then there would be some problems with the law. But how do they legally get Spider-Man without paying anything, or without giving anything, or without doing anything? It's just how.
Game theory, the economics concept. A prisoner's dilemma played at the mega corporation scale with billions of dollars and thousands of jobs on the line. And all of it is centered on that darn webhead. Now, up to this point in our analysis, we've been talking a lot about what Spider-Man is worth to Disney. But it's equally
Alright.
important to consider the value of Spidey's film rights to Sony. Because if we're being honest, Sony needs Spider-Man big time. 6 of Sony's top 10 highest grossing films worldwide are from the Spider-Man franchise. Over
Alright.
50%. It is undeniable.
Over 50% of their highest grossing movies is from Spider-Man. So it's a really big character in Sony size.
Undeniably the studio's biggest property. Without Spider-Man, Sony's next biggest properties are James Bond, pretty solid, and then Jumanji. I mean, don't get me wrong, the new Jumanji movies are a heck of a lot of fun, but you know, there's only so many times that you can laugh about people being put inside The Rock's body. Oh yeah, and then there's also the Da Vinci Code. Woohoo, boy, what is this, 2006? So despite Disney reportedly offering $5 billion, now you can start to see why Sony might not want to sell the webhead for anything less than 10. It's one of the few reliable things they have that has the potential to make large stacks of cash. Last episode we covered the ins and outs of the different agreements Sony and Disney have had in place over the years, so if you'd like more detail on those, check out the previous episode. But knowing those deal points, consider this. Spider-Man Far From Home was under the old agreement where Sony put up 100% of the financing of the movie and got back 95% of what those movies made, with the other 5% going to Disney as an entry fee to get him into the MCU. Mickey Mouse is like the highest paid bouncer of all time.
Want to get into the MCU? Tough. Call me when you can pull in $1 billion.
The film made $1.13 billion, and Sony spent $160 million to make it. In total, Sony walks away with $921 million. And just as a reminder, all of this is super back in the napkin math, not accounting for how much movie theaters make, weird accounting costs, etc., etc. Entertainment is just a weird, sketchy business where numbers can literally mean anything and come from anywhere. I've seen this in action. All of these numbers, take it with the heaviest dose of salt you possibly can. Anyway, that being said, had the movie been made under the current 2019 agreement, Sony would have theoretically had to pay less to finance the movie, $120 million, since Disney now helps pay for the other 25%. As a result, Sony takes home 75% of the return. That's $849 million in gross for a handy little $729 million in profit. Less overall return under this new deal, but remember, they're also having to take on significantly less monetary risk to make the movie. $40 million worth of extra risk. In all honesty, it's a win-win for them. So if we assume that that's approximately the average earnings that they're going to get out of a Spider-Man movie, Sony now has to decide. Would they rather produce 7 films under their current arrangement with Disney to try and earn themselves that $5 billion that was offered while still retaining the film rights to themselves, or would they rather take the easy paycheck of $5 billion right out of the mouse's hands and in the process lose the Spider-Man film rights? Making 7 hit movies is a lot to accomplish, especially when every other Spider-Man story seems to peter out after its 3rd entry. Get it? Peter out? Peter Parker out? Yeah. But seriously, that's a really hard number to hit. But then again, you have Far From Home's amazing reception and super exciting cliffhanger, Venom as its own surprise hit due for its sequel, and a follow-up to Spider-Verse. So all told, the franchise is in a really great place. Spider-Man is stronger than he's ever been right now. It seems like it's a pretty easy call. Sony should keep the film rights and keep raking in that sweet, sweet spider dough for another decade. But all of that's assuming that Sony themselves will be in existence for years and years to come. Haha! And that is the twist, my friends. Rumor has it that Apple is seriously thinking of acquiring Sony in the near future, and those rumors just won't go away. And see, this is where it gets juicy, because if Sony sells, then Spider-Man's film rights automatically revert back to Marvel, which Disney now owns. That's right, Disney would get the Spider-Man film rights for free if Sony winds up getting bought. So basically, it's a white-collar game of chicken. Should Disney pay anything to get the rights when they might simply get them for free, or should they hedge their bets and just buy it to be safe? Should Sony sell the rights to their cash cow because they plan to reject Apple's advances, or should they sell the Spider-Man rights and pocket a cool $5 billion before Apple buys them outright anyway? So here we see why Disney may be less eager to pay Sony's $10 billion price tag, even though Disney can afford it and would likely recoup that investment. Paying $10 billion for the Spider-Man universe wouldn't be the dumbest thing Disney could do, but paying $10 billion when they could have paid $0 for it certainly would be. This is game theory at play in the real world here, folks. I am so excited because this one calls for a good old 2x2 matrix, otherwise known as a payoff matrix. Now, if you're unfamiliar, game theory often uses matrices like these to help identify optimal strategies. The most famous one is the prisoner's dilemma, which is usually done with criminals and suspects, but I actually prefer the other example of the British game show Golden Balls, which is not only a hilarious name, but also has incredibly simple but compelling strategy at play. You see, 2 players work together throughout the game to rack up a big cash pot, but whether they get to walk away with any of that money ultimately depends on one final decision. They can either choose to take it all or split the pot with their partner. If they both choose to split the pot, well, they both win 50% of the day's earnings. If
Alright.
one chooses to take it all and the other player chooses to split, then the person who took it all wins everything, and the other player wins nothing just for being a good person. And if they both choose to be greedy and want to take it all, they both win nothing, and the balls are that much bigger and more golden in the next episode. So now let's give it a spin with our Disney-Sony scenario. Let's assume
Alright.
that Disney only has two options on the table. Either buy the rights for $10 billion price tag that Sony wants, or wait it out with their current deal. Sony, meanwhile, will either get acquired by Apple or not. For our purposes, we'll assume Disney has no idea what Apple plans to do. So this in turn sets up our 2x2 matrix. Disney pay $10 billion or not, Sony get acquired or not. So now let's focus on the Disney payoffs. For Disney, the absolute best outcome is to pay nothing. Sony sells to Apple and Disney just inherits the Spider-Man rights for free. So if Disney waits
Alright.
and Sony gets bought, Disney basically gets $10 billion for free. So we're gonna give this scenario a value of plus 10 for Disney. The absolute worst outcome for Disney would be to pay the $10 billion for the rights, only to then have Sony get acquired by Apple, at which point they would have paid for something that they could have gotten for free. So we're gonna give that scenario a minus 10 to Disney. What if Disney pays but Sony doesn't get acquired? Well, that's just kind of a nothing lost, nothing gained scenario for both parties. Disney pays a little more than they wanted to, but will probably make that price up in time. Sony gets what they believe to be a fair price for their assets. So we're gonna give that one a 0-0 for both sides. Probably more accurately a -1 for Disney because they pay more than they wanted, and a +1 for Sony since they're probably charging a bit of a high price tag, but for simplicity, let's say
Alright.
0-0. Finally, if both Disney and Sony simply stay put in their current 2019 agreement, we're gonna call that a +3 for Disney. Though they get less creative control and less money than they may like, they're gonna make money and get to use Spider-Man in the MCU. Mostly positive. So that's the Disney side of the matrix. Now let's talk about Sony. The best case scenario for Sony is to pull a fast one on Disney. They sell the rights to Spider-Man for $10 billion right before Apple acquires them. It's like finding a wallet with $10 billion in it. So that scenario is a big +10 for Sony. Worst
Alright.
case for Sony would be to not sell the rights at all and then get acquired. They'd be getting nothing for something they themselves had valued at $10 billion, and that they could have very easily sold to Disney for at least $5 billion. So that to Sony is going to be a -10 scenario. Finally, if
Alright.
Sony can manage to continue on with their current arrangement with Disney, that's a small positive. Again, I'd say like a +3 or a +5. They hold on to their biggest franchise, they continue making good money off of it, plus the film rights to Spider-Man could very well continue to increase in value in the meantime. So with our matrix now filled in, what does it tell us? Well, we shouldn't read too much into Sony's options, since the studio may not have much say in whether Apple acquires them or not. That's to say, the massive Apple-Sony deal is probably going to happen or not regardless of whether Spider-Man's measly little film rights get sold off. Apple just probably doesn't care. They're not getting those film rights either way. By the nature of the contract, it always is going to revert back to Marvel. But a clear dominant strategy does emerge for Disney. No matter what happens to Sony, if Disney waits, Disney wins. Best case, they wait and land a 10 when Sony gets acquired. Worst case, Sony doesn't get bought and Disney still lands a +3, which is the second best option for them on the entire matrix. So while Spider-Man's movie rights may very well be worth the $10 billion price tag that Sony seems to believe, it's pretty clear that Disney won't be paying that price. Sony's uncertain
Alright.
future simply puts them in too weak of a negotiating position. If Apple doesn't acquire Sony, expect to see Disney and Sony's uneasy marriage continue indefinitely, as it's mutually beneficial to both parties to keep Sony's movies linked to the MCU. But if the Apple conversations do start to get really serious, expect to see a lot of news about Sony shopping the Spider-Man film rights around in a last-ditch effort to get something for their property. And when that happens, expect Disney to wind up being the highest bidder, taking the movie rights for far less than $10 billion and continuing their unstoppable march towards world domination. So is Spider-Man worth paying $10 billion for? Well, we concluded last time that on paper, the answer was yes. But in practice, the machinations of big business actually say no. Disney shouldn't buy. But hey,
Alright.
that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut.
So yeah, guys, thanks for watching, and of course, peace out, people. Peace.